Hello, all my self-healers. This group is growing, and that's very exciting. So I just wanted to pop on. We only had a few people able to come tonight to our full moon circle. So I wanted to do the teaching via video so you guys have that as well. We are talking about intuition and ego this month. So this session will be mostly on ego. So I just wanted to go through a little bit of what's in your book. I'll kind of skim over it, just so that you have a little bit of context and examples as we go along. The first thing is it's the full moon tonight. It's not often that we actually get to gather on the full moon, so it was nice to see some faces tonight. The sky is in Sagittarius right now. So Sagittarius is an adventurer, a seeker, a dreamer, a big thinker. So with that energy, I know I'm feeling that right now of being like pushed into like a new realm and a new way of thinking. We're also like we're at solstice, we're at next week. So and we also are at the halfway point of the calendar year. So this is an amazing time to kind of look back at how far you've come, first of all, and just like give yourself a round of applause for making it here. Like, I can't even believe we're 6 months into 2022 right now. It's shocking to me, but you made it here. And whether you're still being challenged or you're struggling right now, that's okay. But make sure you look back in the last 6 months and give yourself credit where credit is due. I also want you to take a look at where you might have stayed in your comfort zone, where you've might have made the, like in Sagittarius right now, this is what I want you to be thinking about, is where you might have made like a safer choice rather than trying something new or outside of the box, where you let your ego decide what you wanted, what you were doing instead of yourself and your intuition. And then look towards the future, and like with that information, look towards the future, and when you're and release any of the hangups you have about trusting yourself, because I feel like this is a big time and a time of like change right now for a lot of people, and it's important that you can rely on yourself. So I am so glad that we're talking about intuition and definitely ego tonight, so that we can have a better understanding of who we actually are as we move forward. So our ego, so you guys have a whole section, and I think you guys are pretty self-aware. I think you would probably I'm sure you understand the basics of ego, but basically your ego, it kind of, if not checked, if you don't check your ego, it can kind of become your personality. So our ego is kind of the conditioning that we all go through, and how you kind of walk through the world. So your belief system, the patterns in your life, the ideas about how the world works, how society works, who are the good people, who are the bad people. That all is a part of your personality, and it becomes your ego. Can become your identity. So when you wrap yourself in an ego identity, the world can be a hard place to live, because we're always kind of judging and comparing and things like that. So your ego is formed, and this is like, I mean, everyone has an ego. So our goal is not to get rid of ego in this at all. It's just to recognize what it is, where it came from, and how to be able to work with it and befriend it. So when we're small, like even, I mean, if you think like a baby is born, they are just them. They are pure light, they're pure consciousness. They have no beliefs. They have nothing, no like conditioning, until they walk around the world, or their caregivers treat them in one way or another. And then they start to become, basically they develop ideas about themselves, because as a pure consciousness, all you know is you. You don't understand that other people, even you barely even understand they exist. All you do is rely on them for survival. So we rely on our parents for survival. So we, even if in our, like, maybe if we could have the thought process that what is happening maybe shouldn't be happening. So like a good example for me, and I'm no judgment if you've done this, because I did this myself, and some people still do, and like everyone gets to make their own choices. But a good example of that is like using the cry it out method, and this is something that I did, so no shame. We all learn at different times, but a baby's only way to communicate is through crying, right? So when they cry, they expect affection, they expect love, they expect to be fed, to be changed, to be given what a baby needs, whatever they need at that moment. And parents are guessing, so sometimes we think that, I know, like, you're going to spoil the baby by holding them, and I'm like, babies can't be spoiled. They don't know how to manipulate. Babies are not manipulating you. They just exist. They purely exist based on what they need. So when a baby is put into a separate room and left to cry it out, what they learn is that they are unlovable. So they learn that they don't deserve affection. They don't learn that their parents should go get them. They don't learn that their parents should have a different way of getting them to sleep at night. They take that and learn something about themselves. And then this continues along your life. So this is how the ego develops. Let's say you're trying to be you're something that's very important and stressed a lot in your upbringing is being polite and being like a nice girl or a nice boy or a nice human. If that is like a constant thing for you, you hear your mom say about someone else, or like you don't say please, your mom says, you're going to say please, aren't you? And you're like, oh, she doesn't like that, I'm a bad person. So you take that as like, to be a good person, I must be polite. So when someone walks into your life in present day and they don't hold the door open for you, or they don't say thank you, you might offer them judgment and say, that's not a good person, or like, oh, asshole, or like some kind of comment like that. And that's your ego reaction. And that's something you learned. That person, you like, again, we have no idea what's going on in someone's mind. Like maybe you have no clue. So being able to identify your ego helps you with your own self-awareness, and it helps you in relation to the way that you interact with the world and the people in it. Because the more awareness we have about ourselves, the more perspective we can have about the people that we interact with every day. So I hope that explains. And if you have any questions, like, please just type them underneath the video, or just like post. You're welcome to ask any questions anytime. But basically our ego becomes a very rigid identity of who we are, and definitely who we are not. And it's often like, it's parents and society often uses blame and shame and restrictiveness with kids as a way of controlling them and making sure that they look good to society. And then that's a check mark for parents that I'm a good mom because my kid is well behaved and polite, which might not be the truth. So this is really important. And a good example I was sharing in the group earlier is like, when we talk about shame, when you use shame in parenting, this is an example of Janine and I, would be like, I remember this story my mom constantly told, and I'm going to guess it was me because it was told so often, and something that I remember. Janine might remember it too. I'm sure she does. But this story was like there's like 5 stories that your mom tells. This is one of them. That was so cute is what she thought. And maybe it was in the moment, but now, knowing what I know now, you look back on that and you're like, so something that happened, so this is a story that she would tell, is that one of us hit the other. I'm just going to say it was me. So I hit my sister Janine, and we actually got along really well. So this wasn't something that she dealt with a lot. It wasn't like constant fighting. We got along pretty well over the years. That constant fighting started later on in our teen years. But so something that she would say to us was, shame on you for hitting your sister. And she used to laugh and laugh because the reaction that I had was, don't put shame on me. And I would be crying because I thought shame meant I was a bad person and I was a bad child. And that's the last thing I wanted to do. My whole goal in life was to please my mom. So when there was shame on me, I thought it was like, that was like a cloak I put on of shame. Um, so just like this is what came up when I was rereading through this work as an example, because this is how children identify with what they're told they are and what they're told they're not. So it's really, really important if you're still raising kids now, that we're very careful about what we say to our children. Our words become their thoughts, becomes their ego, becomes who they are. So it's really important as parents that we try our best to instill confidence and trust in themselves, and make sure that they know there's nothing they can do to make a parent love them any less. So, and believe me, I'm cried out, timeouts, shame-based parenting right here too. So please don't feel guilty. It's just that know better, do better. And knowing this helps us parent better. So we can kill two birds with one stone here, by, that's an awful saying, by creating space for new ways of parenting. So ego is going to sound like, it's going to overcompensate. So it's going to have like a strong emotional reaction. So when you feel that like trigger of an emotion and you're like, whoa, where did that come from? Like that's not how I wanted to react. That's your ego. False confidence. So that like overcompensating when you're like kind of being boastful, or like, men do the overcompensating thing really well, where they, pretend that they know more than they do. That black and white rigid thinking, like I'm right, you're wrong. Rejection of any idea that conflicts with our ego beliefs, because we see conflicting beliefs as an attack on ourselves. Because if I'm a vaccinator and I'm a good person because I do that, then that means someone else is a bad person because they don't. So that like anything, that rejection of like any idea that doesn't fit with my value system. Extreme competition. So always trying to be better than someone else, or competing against people that aren't competing with you. That feeling, a constant comparison to others, like I'm bad with this, is comparing and comparing and comparing. And basically all you're doing is looking to see if like, am I better than that person, is what your ego is doing, is just trying to get some confidence, which is just false confidence. Judgment of others. So especially like name calling, mocking someone, insulting people, that kind of thing. Analysis paralysis. So this is where your ego is trying to keep you in one spot. And if your intuition is telling you, you should quit your job and do something different, or you should date that person that isn't your type, or whatever that is, and you get in this state of just overthinking and overthinking and overthinking, that's your ego's way of keeping you safe, keeping you in your comfort zone. So notice when these things come up, notice when you're having a strong reaction, notice when you're comparing, and try to do the practices that we're going to talk about here when you're doing that. So why does ego work matter? Like, why can't we just let ego do what it's been doing? Because I mean, we're all here, we're pretty healthy individuals. I think you guys are all here, you're self-aware enough. But ego work gives you the opportunity to choose how you react. I was telling the circle earlier that I had a very, very strong reaction from a very, very old wound, and like a deep one that happened a few weeks ago. And my ego got so triggered that I like shut down. Like I could not communicate. I could no longer speak. I was like, and that, I feel like that in my head. And then my ego started going worse, of just like, you look stupid. Why aren't you saying anything? Like, this is awkward, da, 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 da. And it just bubbled up until like, I had to leave, and I had to talk to them the next day and apologize for because what a trigger is a emotional reaction to an unequal experience. So something happening where where it's not an equal thing. So like, obviously, your kid almost getting run over by a car, your reaction is like, I'm like, it's going to be a very, very high reaction for good reason, because your child almost passed away, your child almost died, or could have been very severely injured. That's an equal reaction. An unequal reaction means that your ego has been triggered. So when something has happened and you're like, that's not how I wanted to react, why am I reacting that way? This is where ego work is very, very important, because we want to walk through the world in good relationship and being in a healthy space. We don't want to be shut down and not able to speak. That's not how we want to be. So this is a practice. And being able to do this work, just like I'm with you, just with all of you, doing this work takes time and energy, and it's worth it, because at the end you'll be able to live in a way that you're not constantly feeling like you're out of control, right? So our job here is not to kill the ego. We're not trying to deny its existence. We're not trying to quiet it down so that it doesn't speak to us. You're not trying to get rid of your ego in any way, shape, or form. That is spiritual bypassing. That is acting like a part of you doesn't exist, and your ego is not going anywhere. So when people are like, I don't have an ego, like, bullshit. We all have an ego. It's a part of our psyche. It's deeply, deeply ingrained. So if they don't think they have one, then they're probably just living in it. The ego is really like, think of it as your protector, as your bodyguard. I like to think of the ego as my inner child's bodyguard, because and it's protecting me against things that I have experienced, very valid things, very valid pain points in my life and traumas that I've gone through, whether they're little t traumas, but I was very little myself. So that little t feels that much bigger. So just know that the goal of your ego is one that you should appreciate. And that's what we're going to do the work here tonight, and walk through the steps of kind of softening your ego, befriending your ego, but also creating boundaries. Just like any other relationship, we need to create a healthy relationship with our ego. That is the goal, not to get rid of it. And that's where real confidence comes from, because you hear the ego, and then you make a decision and a response based on your intuition and based on who you actually are, not on who you've been conditioned to be. Does that make sense? I hope so. So that's why it's so important. It's one of the most important work you can do, because this helps your triggers and it helps you be able to feel your feelings, because that's really where it comes down to, as you'll see in a second here. So the first thing that we want to do, and some of you might already do this, so it's just basically your step one is allow your ego to introduce itself. So that's allow your ego to exist outside of who you are. So that is the goal, is that you're just observing that you have an ego. That's step one. And these steps, just like all the work in these modules, is to be done when you're called to do it. So just because we're in June and we're talking about ego work, that does not mean that you have to show up to these. It doesn't mean that you have to do this work right now. You are going to come, I would read it so you know what you're going to be doing and know what to look for. And when it comes up, you can do this work. And you have the tools always with you to be able to do it going forward. So if you're called to do it now, do it now. But what I want you to do is just like literally just for like a couple days in a row before bed, in a quiet space, like kind of like a meditative state, in the bath, even in the car, like just somewhere where it's quiet, where it's just you and your ego and yourself. The ego doesn't like to be observed. So you might start getting like some racing thoughts with this. You might start getting like, oh, like, this is stupid, or like, what do you mean? Like things like that. That's your ego trying to protect itself because it's kind of had the reins for a very long time in most of our lives. So it might kind of like try to push back. And I want you to just hear it and say, like, why can't I believe that my ego is separate from you? Why can't this be true? Um, so just this is what I want you to practice with. So find a quiet place, no distractions, where you feel comfortable. Close your eyes, take a couple just deep breaths, and just repeat the affirmation: I am safe, and I choose a new way to experience myself separate from my ego. That's it. So you don't have to repeat that word for word if you don't remember it. All you have to say is that I choose a new word, a new way to experience myself separate from my ego. You could say, I am separate from my ego. So, especially if you feel like it's bubbling up and you're like, wait, is that my ego? You just remind yourself, I am not my ego. I am separate from my ego. So, there's no like perfect way to do any of this work. Do it in your own words at your own time. So this is really just priming your brain to just relax into this work, to relax into the idea that you have more control over your thoughts, and you can question them more than you have been. So just do this for a couple nights and see how it comes. Um, it might be uncomfortable to feel this way because sometimes we're like, I know who I am and I believe in what I believe, and my core beliefs are very important to me, and I have moral boundaries and like things like this. That's your ego again. When you start to hear that stuff, just say, I'm not my ego. What you are is that same baby that came into the world, just pure consciousness. You are just a spirit. So we are having a very human experience, and the ego is a part of our human experience. In the spirit world, you don't have spirits with ego. This is a part of our safety, of our way of staying alive in our human skin suit. So just think of it that way, is that like, okay, who am I? Like, if you're not your personality, if you're not your value system, if you're not your belief system, who are you? And that's where I want you to just connect to, like, you are a divine being, and you don't have to listen to all the stuff that you've been conditioned into listening to. Um, just step one. So that's just step one. Let your ego exist outside of you. That's it. So you can do this in any which way you want. If this feels weird, do something else. You can write instead of saying. You can write instead of thinking. Whatever you want to do. Just I want you to remind yourself a couple times this week, or whenever you feel called, that your ego is not you. That you're separate, and you can experience your world differently. Okay. Step number 2 is just have a friendly encounter. So this is like, I just want you to pay attention to, and in the circle, we had kind of people do examples of like, when does your ego get triggered? And think about this when you're doing this work too. Just think of times when your ego feels like, where your ego was triggered. So like that situation, I was like, oh shit, like I was 100% triggered. Like it was very clear. Sometimes it's very obvious. Sometimes it's like, but that's because I have this thought, or that's because of this, that's because of that. If you're making excuses and logicking your way around it, it's your ego. So what I want you to notice is, what is the word that you say after I? And one of my favorite quotes is, whatever follows I am will always come looking for you, because that is what you're putting out into the world. So if you're putting out something that I do all the time after I is like, oh, I'm so stupid. Oh, I'm so dumb. Oh my God, I did the dumbest thing. Oh, I did that whatever follows I is your ego. It's usually not positive. It's like, oh, I don't belong there. Oh, they think I'm stupid. Oh, it's I listen, so that your job for step number 2, and if you feel like you know that your ego isn't you, you can skip that step and just move on. If you're very well aware that your ego is not you, you can move on. So do this in any way that works for you. But I want you to meet your ego when it's not triggered. I want you to meet your ego in a conversation, just a casual, you're at work, you're talking to your husband, you're talking to your kids, you're talking to whoever, and I want you to just take, kind of like you're just taking mental note, for later, of what your ego was saying. So First of all, notice everything you say after I. Notice that in a conversation, how often you say I blank, and listen for that word because you will hear it. You'll start to hear what you're saying. So once a day, um, I wouldn't mind you noting this in a conversation with yourself, because if you, I don't know, some people don't have an inner dialogue. So if you don't have that, what's that like? Like, is that awesome? That must be awesome, because I wish. It's exhausting having an inner dialogue. So I really, um, yeah, I wish that was the case, but that's not for me. But if you have an inner dialogue, which most of you probably do, I think that's more common. Listen for what you have, the conversations you're having with yourself too. Okay, so do this for a conversation that you're having with someone else. And I want you to do this with a conversation that you're having with yourself, because we are good at listening to what society wants. And right now, society doesn't want to hear that we think we're fat, or we think we're stupid, or we think we're ugly, or we think we're whatever. Society doesn't want to hear that. They want positivity, positivity all the time. So you might hear yourself in conversation pumping yourself up and talking really positive about yourself. And then you might hear yourself in your inner dialogue talking really badly about yourself. So the most important conversations you could ever have are up here. So please make sure that you notice both, because you might notice a difference in how you talk to yourself out loud versus in your head. So the prompts that you're going to use for noticing is, how often do I speak about myself? So again, how often are you thinking about yourself in your day-to-day also? So how, like, what you're doing and how you're doing and how you show up to other people. So in that inner dialogue, what does it sound like for you when you're talking to yourself? How often are you just talking about in circles about yourself? And same thing in conversation. So a lot of what we've been taught to how to relate to people isn't actually listening. It's just like relating. So we're just trying to like, oh, I belong by, so basically you're like answering by just giving a story about yourself. And I do this too. So don't, please, again, there's no judgment in this space. We are human beings. We've all been conditioned the same fucking way. So you are not alone. But just notice how often that you interrupt someone's story with something about yourself when it's not needed. Sometimes people need that and they're looking for that. They've asked you about yourself, but notice how often you bring yourself up. Okay. In here too. And then, what was the adjective I used to describe myself? So what adjectives in a course of a day or a conversation or a thought are you using to describe yourself? What follows I? Okay. And did anything in that conversation bring any uncomfortable emotional reaction? So did someone bring up something that you're like, ugh, like even politics or vaccination, masking, COVID, obviously that's a big topic. I hope we're done with that soon, but notice when you have an emotional reaction to something that has very little to do with you, and describe it, because that's going to show you where your triggers are. So this is just witnessing your ego. So this isn't like, okay, now I'm going to change that. I'm not going to do that anymore. This is just, I want you to just spend a couple days, let's say 3 days on the first one, 3 days at the next one, on noticing your ego and noticing how you're talking to yourself. Okay. So that's step 2. Step 3 is my favorite. And I think one of the most important steps. It's naming your ego. And I did this, I wasn't taught this, I don't think. I think this came up with my daughter when she was having some trouble with her own ego, and I could see it. And I didn't know how to explain like the difference between that the voice, how to explain to her that the voice in her head was not her, was not real, was not true, was not telling her the truth about herself. And this came up in a story, in a swimming test. So basically she kept getting so nervous and like anxious about a swim test that she was like not doing things that she wanted to do. So she was invited to birthday parties, or someone was like, oh, let's go swimming, and she would turn it down even though swimming was her favorite thing. And she could swim, but she got so in her head and believed the lies that she was being told by her ego that she was like self-sabotaging herself. So this, I think she was about 9, like she's probably 5 years ago now. And I remember having this conversation. And I was like, what's going on up there? Like, what does it say? Like, what's your brain saying right now? What are you saying to yourself? And she said the things like, oh, I'm not good enough, and I'm gonna be embarrassed, and this is gonna happen, and that's gonna happen. And I told her, like, okay, that name, that person that's inside your head doesn't sound like you. Like, do you know that you can swim? Yeah. Do you know that you're safe to do the swim test? Yes. Like, well, then who's talking to you? And we decided to name our egos. So we called it, I called mine Gertrude, and she called hers the same. So sometimes we call it Gertie or Gertrude. But this is something that we did a long time ago. And for me, it probably helped me more than it helped her. I don't even know if she remembers. She might. Um, but we had this conversation about that the voice in your head is not the truth, and the voice in your head is separate from you. And I think it's really, 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 really important. And the easiest way to separate it from you is by giving it a name, because then it's not you. It's no longer the voice in your head. It's Gertrude. And Gertrude, she's a bitch. She doesn't know me at all. She doesn't know what I want. She doesn't know what I need. She's just trying to protect me. Okay. So I know Janine's that I'll share. Hers is Mean Janine. So she has a nice rhymey one, which is fun. But you can call your ego whatever feels comfortable for you. So just it's really, really, really important. And you might like sit with this for a little bit and just start saying like, oh, hey, Gertrude, when it happens. So notice when she's triggered and just say, oh, hi, Gertrude, like acknowledge that this is not you. And this is like just continuing on with those steps of separating you from your ego, so that you know that you actually have a choice and your ego doesn't control you. So the next part is meeting your triggered ego. So this, you want to make sure that you know you're not your ego first. So separate is very, very important. And then we're going to look, like, basically kind of dig in to what happens for you emotionally when your ego is triggered. So when that happens, what happens? That's what we want to know. So an example here is like, so something that's like feels very innocuous, like where it shouldn't really feel like it's like that, where the emotional response is not equal to the event. So let's say you're at a barbecue and you show up and you're whatever, you're tired, and your sister says that to you. So she says, oh, you look tired. And she really is just like, her question is probably, oh, you look tired. Like, are you okay? What's going on? But instead she said, you look tired. And the reaction that you give sarcastically is like, of course I'm tired. I'm tired. I've been working 60 hours and raising a child. What about you? You do nothing and it must be nice to have a ton of free time. Oh, well, make sure next time I'll put makeup on, and you just cause a rift. And your sister was concerned about you. So this is a trigger. This is not the appropriate reaction to the event, right? So I think we can agree on that, unless your sister is a bully and this is what she does. But still, your reaction could still be, yeah, I am tired. Because you are. You just said you are. So why not just respond with like, yeah, I'm tired. That's it. That's the reaction if you agree with her. It doesn't need to mean anything. But what happens is our ego is a master storyteller. And the story that your ego is telling you about your sister is that she thinks you're not a good mom. She thinks you are lazy, maybe. She thinks that you're not doing enough and you should look better and you're ugly or something like that. Those are the things that the story that your ego is making up about the comment that your sister made. So what the ego might have heard is, she's always so rude and condescending. She's jealous of you your whole life, or she's little Miss Hotshot. She thinks she's better than me, something like that. Your ego has so many events to back up what it feels and what it thinks the person means. So, and you usually can't even consciously remember, like, why did I react that way? That's not, and you even like, it's just doesn't, it usually doesn't really make sense. But what your ego is trying to do is protect you from getting hurt. So at some point, you were criticized in a way that hurt you deeply. And your ego is just like, oh, I've been through that. I'm not doing that again. So I'm gonna react like this. So that's where you're kind of listen for those times that you're triggered, where the emotional reaction does not equal the event. That's the definition of a trigger. So the prompts, what you're gonna do next time you're triggered, you're going to feel your heart beat faster. You're going to feel your face flush. You're going to feel a nervous system reaction, because what's happening is that our nervous system, like our ego, is basically trying to protect us. It's a part of our awareness, and our ego is so strong that it's actually messing with our nervous system all the time. So that's another reason why this is so important, so we can have some peace in our bodies. Because when you're triggered, it's not like you're like you just say it and it goes away. You carry that for the rest of the day. You're elevated. You're no longer present at the barbecue that you're at with your sister or whoever else. You leave. Like, and that one comment did that to you, and that's not the way we want to live. We want to have peace in our nervous system. We want to be calm. So what you're going to do is, next time you're going to notice, and you're going to feel like you're about to lose it, or you feel like you're going to shut down, or you feel like you're going to need to yell, or you feel like you're going to need to leave. You're going to do the flight thing. You're going to go. These are your nervous system reactions, and our ego is a sensor for our nervous system. So this is where we need to befriend our ego. What you're going to do is the prompts are here. So this is an example of someone, the example that I had here is like your husband leaving dishes on the sink, leaving socks on the floor, not doing what you think he should be doing. Often, unless there's a chronic issue and your husband is like, abusing the situation, and but most of the time these are actually just triggers, and there's ways for us to deal with these like interrelational issues without creating meaning about ourselves about it. And I'll show you what that looks like. So after you're triggered in the moment, you might just need, you're most of the time, when you get triggered, you're going to be out in public. It's convenient if you happen to be on, sometimes things trigger us on the old internets. So if you're at home, do it right away. Do this right in the moment. If you're not, though, do this when you get home or later on when you're calm and you know that you reacted poorly and that's not how you want it to react. That's a good one to go for, because you already have awareness that that's not what you want to be doing. So here are the prompts. I felt the emotion of blank when triggered. So for this, when you're talking about like, if I was triggered by this isn't something I get triggered by because I'm the lever in the sink dishes person. We have the opposite dynamic in our house. But if this was something, this is just an example, I felt the emotion of anger when I was triggered. So if I get angry, like I see dishes and I'm like, fuck, like really, that feeling. So you also might just feel like, oh, like exhausted by it, or like overwhelmed. That could be the emotion. Whatever emotion you feel, that's the emotion you feel. If you need help, we got our handy dandy emotions wheel. Go to that. Actually, I still need to look it up because I actually still don't know, and I'm going to do this for myself. Because when I was triggered, I'm trying to think of what the emotion was that I felt, and I'm like, oh, what is it? It's under sadness, or maybe anger. It's hard to say. Let me see. Provoked, withdrawn is a good one. Powerless is also one of the feelings that I had in that situation. So if you need help, that's what it's there for. We're used to like 5 emotions, identifying with them. Anger is one of them. If you can try to find something a little bit deeper, it might help you understand yourself a bit more. So the next prompt is, I felt the emotion of anger when my husband left dishes in the sink. So then you're just bringing the actual event into it. So then you're like, I felt anger when dishes were in the sink. Does that when you just say that out loud, I felt anger when dishes were in the sink. Is that how you want to live your life? Think about that. That if is that your ego, or is that a valid reaction? And it is valid because you're having it. So, but is it the way you want to react? Is that the way you want to live your life, being angered by dishes in the sink? Because think about, if you're angry with dishes, imagine what the laundry feels like. Imagine what the sock on the floor feels like. Imagine what the toilet feels like. Like everything in your life then becomes a trigger if we can't actually find the reason why anger comes up when I see dishes in the sink. So this is what we're going to dig into. So the next one, and this might take a couple tries, because the first one we go to is going to be like very surface level, because that's what we're working with our ego. We're telling our ego that we're just going to work on this, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. We just want to know why our ego was so triggered. So we're having a very gentle conversation, but this might take a couple like tries at it, because the first one might be like surface level, the next one might be closer, and then the next one is probably the one that is actually happening. So the event of leaving dishes in the sink means something. So what is the meaning of the event for you? What does that mean? So you might say at the beginning, you might say that the event of leaving the dish in the sink means that my husband's lazy. Okay. Or means that he thinks I'm his maid. True? Not true. Right? So that might be what comes up first, especially if you're in the moment triggered. But try to think a little bit deeper. So the event of leaving the dishes in the sink means that I have to do everything. The event of leaving dishes in the sink means that I'm not worthy of consideration. Because what you feel, so if you go like, he thinks I'm his maid, what is that? What is the meaning behind me being his maid? Right? That I'm not, that what I do is less important than what he does, or that what I do is like, I'm in service to him. So just keep going down until you actually get what the meaning of the event is for you. So that's really, really important to kind of give it, because your first one is probably not going to be it. Make sure you go a little bit deeper. And if you need help with this, I'm going to put these prompts in here, and just if anyone has trouble figuring out what's going on with them, I can try to help. I know sometimes, like even with myself, I'm like, what is it that thing triggered? It's not something I can talk about, or I would share it with you. But when I was listening in the circle to the people, and I'm like, you know what that sounds like? It sounds like belonging. Usually it comes down to worth, safety, and belonging. These are our core needs, is to feel worthy of existing. If we don't feel worthy of existing, it's very difficult to do anything in life. It's very difficult to climb up that ladder of needs and trying to get to this like divine space when you don't feel worthy of even being here. So worthy, safety, belonging. Notice those three, okay? Though usually they come down to that. But basically your ego felt a core emotion of unworthiness. So your ego was triggered into unworthiness. That's what happened. And that is painful. And because we're so used to not processing emotions, because we don't even know they're happening, we can't name them. So how are we supposed to process them? How are we supposed to feel them? We project it outwards, and we start slamming dishes in the sink, and we're like all pissed off, go to bed, angry, which is, I don't think that's the way anyone wants to live. So this is your step 4, is meeting your triggered ego. Make sure you have a name and say, Gertrude, what's going on with you? What was going on? What happened? What was the meaning? What meaning did you get from your sister saying you're tired? What meaning did you get from someone questioning whether something was done in your house? Meaning. Come down to like, what does it mean for you? Because that is what our ego is very good at doing, is coming up with like innocuous things and deciding that they mean something about who we are. So that's how we do that, step number 4. And then we're going to do step number 5, which is appreciate and accept the ego. So this is befriending. This is saying, thank you for being here, ego, because I did not know that my unworthiness was triggered here. And I'm so glad you pointed that out so that I can make sure I can remind myself that my worthiness has nothing to do with how many dishes are in the sink or whether my husband does them or not. So this is a very important one, and this one takes a lot of practice because we're used to rejecting ideas that are different than what we think. And this is like your intuition is going to be there to be able to calm down your ego and say like that everything is okay and that I am safe whether I am triggered or not, and I am safe to feel the feeling of unworthiness. So the prompts for this are: I appreciate that my ego, I appreciate you, Gertrude, for protecting me against unworthiness. You did a really good job. Thank you for protecting me. Okay, in your own words. Again, this is not a script. This is like you figure out what that feels like, what that sounds like for you. Call her by her name, them by their name. It's okay to experience unworthiness. Sometimes I feel that, and that's just a part of the human experience. Sometimes I feel unworthy. That's okay. I no longer have to attach events to my life, to meanings of unworthiness. So you're basically saying like, I don't have to put those 2 and 2 together. I don't have to let the world tell me whether I am worthy because I know I'm worthy. And that's how you end it, is really saying, and this is if it's a safety issue, if something happens and you're like, whoa, that's what's happening, it's triggering your safety. Make sure you finish with, I am safe. I know I'm safe. So it's just calming the ego down. It's teaching the ego that you got this. We got this under control. You don't need to protect me so much. And this is informing your inner child that like, they're okay, they're safe. A lot of us weren't safe. A lot of us did not feel worthy. A lot of us didn't feel like we belonged. So these are natural reactions. There's nothing wrong with you for feeling like this. This is how we all feel and why we're all in this group together and why this work needs to be done. So just like repeat. So I appreciate that, Gertrude, I'm so glad you protected me from unworthiness. That was really nice of you. But it's okay for me to experience unworthiness. I'm safe to experience unworthiness because I no longer have to attach events in my life to my worth because I know I'm worthy. And what does that feel like if you talked to your ego that way? So this is where you befriend, appreciate. You're not just telling it like, go sit down, go get in the corner, shut up. You're talking to your ego like they're your friend because they have to be. They're not going anywhere. Gertrude is here to stay. So it's time to just accept that she's there and remind her how safe you are. And this is a practice you'll have to do over and over and over and over until she won't get triggered so much. And you'll be able to live in a way that's more in flow and less feeling like you're always trying to avoid triggers, because that's what we have tended to do in our healing journeys, is like, oh, that triggers me, I'm going to avoid that. I'm going to avoid that person because they trigger me. I'm going to avoid that situation because it triggers me. When really you have way more control over your triggers than you think you do. Way more acceptance is available for you if you can speak it. So, and then step 6 is like next level. Okay, because think about this. This is the way you're relating to yourself. Okay, so this is just your internal dialogue. This is what's going inside of you, just with stuff that's happening, what people say to you, people do to you, that kind of thing, things that are going on in your life. What about the way you think about everyone else? What about the way you relate to the rest of the world? So this is really, really important. So step number 6 is confront your biases, because you are not a vaccinator. That's not your identity. You're not, or maybe you're an anti-vaxxer. That's not your identity. It's not, I'm anti-vax. Your identity is, I make choices for myself. an identity, your identity is not, like I don't know, I can't think of an example at the moment, but what's happening is basically we are only looking in the world for places that, so if we say over and over that I don't belong there and I don't belong there, often this is one of the things that we repeat to ourselves. You're going to be looking around the world for all the places you don't belong. So you're looking for all the places where you don't, and what you're doing is confirming that you're the person that you say you are. You're the person that you were raised to be. You're the person that you were conditioned to be. And either we can stay in this little box if we want to, or we can stop the divisiveness and we can try to understand each other. We can try to accept that there are other perspectives in this world. Not in the history of time have any group of people agreed on everything. Never. So we're walking through the world expecting that everyone should agree with the way I think, because the way I think is the right way. And isn't that like the most biased thing you've ever heard in your life? Because it's one of the things someone brought up tonight. It's like, oh, I feel like maybe I don't feel like a good mom because my mom, like I'm so spoiled because my mom comes and helps me. Sorry, I'm using this. The word spoiled is even just like, whoa, your mom wants to come and help you. That's not spoiling. That's an amazing relationship. And that's a cultural bias, because there are most cultures have generations living in the same household, working, raising kids, paying bills together, helping each other. Our culture is the one that has separated us from our family and from support. We are the culture that has worked women to the bone to prove that we're worthy of existing. So this is where you really need to watch your biases, because the only way for us to grow as a society, and for you specifically, is to hear conflicting opinions, because that is what helps us grow. That is what helps us understand people better. And you have to look at everyone. So this part, number 6, is confronting your bias. So what the job that you're going to have, the task I want you to have is go watch a YouTube video about something that you vehemently, I don't know how to pronounce that. I've only spelled it. That you absolutely disagree with. So whether that be like a Trump supporter, someone that's anti-vax, flat earthers, something that you are like, no, that's bullshit. That's what I want you to go watch. And I want you to just listen to the way your ego reacts to opinions that are different than yours. You don't have to agree with them. You just have to allow them to exist. You just have to allow them to exist. So I want you to sit with the emotion it brings up, because it's going to feel like tightness in your chest. Your throat's going to feel tight. Probably you're going to want to be like, you're a fucking idiot. Listen for that. Okay. And allow yourself to listen to their words objectively. Allow yourself to stand. It's like, there's a thing that I've done before where it's like a frame, and this is our perspective, but I want you to like move the frame. This is my little perspective. This is my ego box. I want you to like just peek outside of the frame and imagine the world that person grew up in. And for them to have the opinion that they have, what happened in their lives? Maybe they're from a different country altogether. Maybe they're from a very different part of our country. Maybe they were raised and conditioned in a way to make them think that way. And maybe they're being controlled by their ego just like us. So this is the practice of allowing other opinions to exist. We are all responsible, like, for the consciousness of the world. Each of us has a role to play. If we allow ourselves to just keep going the way we're going, only put on our blinders and only be friends and only communicate with people that think the same way we do and do things the same way we do, we are going to continue to live in a world that's divisive. And either you can be a part of the solution, or you can be a part of the problem. And this is a part of the solution, is being able to allow opinions to exist that are not the same as yours. It's tough. This is a very next level practice. So if you can't do it, it's okay. Take your time and just practice it, even in just like regular conversations. Like, I don't agree with that, but it's okay, it exists. Just tell even Gertrude, calm down. They can still be a good person and not vaccinate their kids. Is that true? Do you believe that? Do you just imagine your reaction? Like your inner reaction is like, idiot. Like imagine talking to another human being and like, we're mirrors for each other. If we're calling someone an idiot, we're calling ourselves an idiot. Like this is the same thing. If we have that strong of an opinion and we don't allow other people to have them, we will never ever grow. So that's your challenge. Do the other ones first. Work on yourself first, okay? And just notice when you're triggered by things that happen outside of you based on other people's opinions, okay? So that's it for ego stuff tonight. Next time we talk, we're going to talk about intuition. I'll just talk a little bit about intuition right now because we're going to do a little exercise. I'm going to do it in another video so that someone, if they don't want to listen to my whole spiel, they can just do the exercise itself. They don't have to listen to an hour of me blabbering. So, me blabbering. Isn't that interesting? That's my ego talking, not valuing the work I do. You're not going to be able to unhear it, guys. Okay, so intuition is the exact opposite of ego. So ego is going to put you in a circle, a thought loop of just like, so in your book, a circle, okay? Circle, 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 the same thought over and over and over and over and over and over. It might sound like a little bit different, but it's the same thought and it's happening over and over and it keeps you in the cycle of like same thinking, okay? Your intuition, you can picture it as a spiral. Okay, so it's like, here's your problem, here's the small thinking, and then you're like, but what if this? But what if that? But what if that? And you're able to see the bigger picture and it's going to move outward. So this is the same thing as like, if you've heard of like the spiral staircase, where it's like you're constantly moving up and you're still climbing. It's still hard. You're still going, but you're moving. Okay, so you're moving out of just one way of thinking. Okay, so that's the difference between your ego and intuition. Your ego wants you to stay in the same repeating things over and over, to keep you in your comfort zone, to not move you. And because this feels very, very safe for ego. If you never move out of your comfort zone, you're so safe. You can't get hurt. You're not going to get your feelings hurt. You're not going to fail because you're safe. You're in your box. Okay, that's what ego wants. Intuition wants you to grow, and growth comes with failure. Growth comes with trial and error. Your intuitive thoughts are going to expand your thinking. They're going to make you feel like, wait, what if, but what if I do this? It's that thought. It's that like, it's not connected to logic. It's just going to feel right. Your intuition urges you to move beyond what you think you know. That's your intuition. Your intuition is a higher consciousness. So it's very important that we can connect to it, because when we sometimes we're like, when people stay in the same position for their entire lives and they never grow, it's because they're stuck in ego and they're not listening to intuition, because we all have it. Every single person has intuition. It's our higher self. It's our connection. It's what makes us the magical beings that we are. Your ego is going to sound loud, forceful, attached to strong emotions. Your intuition is going to feel calm and quiet and detached. They're going to feel opposite. Stream of thoughts. So it's going to be just like, when you jump from like worst case to worst case to worst case to worst case to worst case, that's the kind of thoughts it's going to have. Intuition is going to be like single statements, like, but what if I tried to do this one thing? And it's like above what you think, and that's it. It's not going to be like, because if you try to do this, then that's going to happen, and that like, it's not going to follow it. It's just going to be a one thought. But it's going to be a repetitive message, like, you can do this. That's going to be the message that you're going to hear, like, you're strong enough. That's what the message you're going to hear, but it's going to be like one single statement, not a whole bunch of rambling in your head. It's all loving, it's kind, it's supported, it's connected, it's going to feel like oneness. Your ego is going to want to rationalize with logic. It's going to try to show you like, but A plus B equals C. So then if you do this, then that's going to happen. And that's your ego. Okay. It creates separation between you and others. Intuition creates connection. It creates doubts, worries. It's going to be harsh. It's going to feel negative. It wants you to keep you the same. Intuition doesn't always have a logical explanation. It's going to feel like that gut feeling of like, I just know I need to do this. And that is what's so hard to trust, because we've been run by ego for so long that when you hear your intuition, you're going to feel like, but how do I trust that? I don't know why that's going to work. I don't know why I should try it, because you're always looking for the why, because your ego has been running the show. It's going to come with symbolic messages. So you're going to have like, you might have synchronicities or things that happen that are like, what? Or connections that are made that are just like, things are happening and you don't know why. That's your intuition. Your ego is going to see the world with a fearful lens. It's going to look for all the ways you're going to fail before it's going to let you do anything. It tends to be self-centered, self-serving. Your intuition comes with, it increases when you ask for guidance. So it's going to feel like, it's like when you ask for guidance, it's going to try to help you to get what you need, instead of showing you the ways that you're not going to be able to do it, if that makes sense. It uses judgment and lies to prove a point. Where your ego wants you to grow, it wants you to expand, it wants you to be more, not less. It wants you to succeed the way your heart wants you to succeed, not the way that the world has conditioned you for success. That makes sense. So what we're going to do, actually, I'm going to close this and I'm going to do one more video that you should watch with your envelopes and your cards. And I want you to try this practice. Okay. So thank you for being here. If you have any questions, any comments, if you try anything and want to like talk about it, message me, post in the group, post underneath, and I'm happy to help. Thanks for being with me and listening to my wonderful words of wisdom, not blabbering. Love you guys.